Hello, I'm Brian Kirby, host of 502 Conversations. The following conversation was recorded at SciCon 2019. SciCon is the annual Committee for Skeptical Inquiry Conference, a 4-day event sponsored by the Center for Inquiry, where people from all over the world gather to attend workshops and talks given by scientists, critical thinkers, doctors, investigative journalists, philosophers, and others, all promoting reason and science and fighting against pseudoscience in all of its forms, including medical quackery, psychics, conspiracy theories, superstition, and magical thinking. Speakers have included Brian Greene, Julia Sweeney, Richard Dawkins, Stephen Fry, Paul Offit, Elizabeth Loftus, Kurt Anderson, Michael Mann, and many, many more. The Center for Inquiry encourages scientific inquiry, critical investigation, and the use of reason, and they publish Skeptical Inquirer, the magazine for science and reason. You can learn more at centerforinquiry.org. And now, a really fun and interesting conversation with Natalia Pasternak, President, Institute Question of Science, Brazil. Welcome to 502 Conversations. I'm Brian Kirby, and my guest today is Natalia Pasternak. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I should say it's Dr. Natalia Pasternak.
You don't have to, but it feels good, yeah.
Oh, okay. Would you like me to call you Dr. Pasternak?
Not at all.
Natalia?
Oh, Natalia's fine.
And I have quite a bio on you, and I'm going to read it because the information is important, because it establishes your background and what you know so that you actually know what you're talking about, which is very important.
Okay.
So I will refer to these notes because it's too impressive for me to have memorized. Is that okay?
Oh, it's not that impressive, but thank you.
So Natalia Pasternak earned a bachelor's degree in biology from Institute of Biosciences of the University of São Paulo and a PhD and 2 postdoctoral fellowships in microbiology in the field of bacterial genetics at the Institute of Biomedical Sciences. Is that correct? And did I say that correct? São Paulo?
Yes, São Paulo is perfect.
Great. She is a founding partner and president of a Question of Science Institute, the first Brazilian nonprofit for the promotion of skepticism and rational thinking, and publisher of the magazine Question of Science. Natalia is co-author of the book Neuro-Mythbusters Volume 2 and author of the book Everyday Science. She is also the founder of the initiative Scientists Explain, which offers lectures, classes, and workshops for schools, universities, museums, and research institutes, and she ran the Brazilian chapter of the International Science Communication Festival, Pint of Science, from 2016 to 2019. Currently, apart from running IQS, she is a research fellow at University of São Paulo and a member of the American Society for Microbiology Science Teaching Fellows alumni community. Whew. That's a bit.
That's it.
Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're having a conversation, and I'm not always the brightest bulb in the room, and in this case, it's more than evident. So I may have to stop you and interrupt and say, can you explain that in greater detail?
I'll be glad to.
If you drop some stuff I don't understand. And let's talk about the Question of Science, because that just launched, right, in 2018.
Yep.
And before we get too into other things, how is that going, and what's the response been?
I think it's been going pretty well. We're going to be a year old now in November, so it's still pretty new. It's the first institute in Brazil for the promotion of rational thinking and skepticism, so we are trying to build a community. Nothing has been done in Brazil so far to bring the community of skeptics together. So they have all been scattered throughout the country, and I think they have all been afraid to speak up. because they felt they were alone, and well, I'm probably the only one that thinks that homeopathy is bogus, and I'm probably the only one that is worried about creationism being taught in our schools. And then suddenly, when we launched the Institute, these people realized that they were not alone, and there was someone to represent them and to speak for them, and they could be part of that community. So the reaction that we got so far is that several people from all the regions in the country, and Brazil is huge, they have been coming to us to collaborate with the magazine and to collaborate with the events of the Institute, and they defend us against haters on Facebook and Twitter. So I think for a year we've done quite a lot, and people are starting to realize that we're there to stay.
So it's kind of an organization like Center for Inquiry? Where
it is, but of course much smaller. But we really, Center for Inquiry really helped us settle the question of Science Institute in Brazil. I had a long talk with Barry Carr last year here at SciComm, and he gave me lots of tips and advice on how to build it in Brazil, how to start. So we've got quite a lot of help from CFI here and from the Good Thinking Society in the UK. So we went after societies who had been doing it for much longer than we. So
is it a volunteer publication organization, much like if someone wants to write an article, it's you or a team reviews it, but basically it's a volunteer thing. This is something I think someone might say, this is an important issue I want to raise, and they present it to you, and then they write it, but it's kind of a volunteer.
It is. Well, unfortunately, we don't get to pay for articlists to write, but we do have a chief editor who's a science journalist, and he will review all the articles and pieces that people send us, and we write a lot. So we have a team that writes for the magazine on a regular basis, and then we accept collaborations from anyone who feels that they have an important issue that they want to tackle, and they have no news outlet that would have them, because I think our magazine is much like Skeptical Inquirer. It's the only publication of its kind in Brazil. So we are the only ones who are going to write an article about homeopathy without giving the other side that general newspapers usually do. So if you go to, at least in Brazil, if you go to a national newspaper and you see a piece on homeopathy, they will give you the science view and they will give you the homeopath's view. So they're going to interview a homeopathy doctor and ask him why he thinks that it works. And it ends up with a feeling of a false equivalence.
What is a homeopathic doctor? They aren't actually doctors. Are they actually called doctors in Brazil?
They have to be. Homeopathy in Brazil is a medical specialization. It's recognized by the Federal Board of Medicine. So
no kidding?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Okay, so now we're way ahead of where I wanted to get, but I'm quite confused. It's actually so they are called doctors?
They are doctors.
So wait.
They go to medical school.
They go to medical school.
Yes.
They get into, I don't even know how it works, but you go to medical school, then you get like a residency for 3 years.
Yes.
So they are actually medical doctors.
They are medical doctors.
So they know about medicine, and then they choose to become homeopaths.
Yes.
So they go through all that training in science and biology, everything you have to do.
Biochemistry and biology and basic, they are medical doctors.
So how do you come out of a medical school and then all of a sudden think that dilution makes things stronger?
I have no idea. This is something that we're trying to battle in Brazil. We want homeopathy to be crossed out of the medical practices.
Let's explain homeopathy in case somebody just knows the word but they actually don't know what it means. Do you mind?
No, of course not. I think it's important.
When we're saying homeopathic doctor, what does that mean?
It means someone who's going to treat you with a doctrine that was invented 200 years ago by a guy named Samuel Hahnemann in Germany. And he invented a practice called homeopathy that is based on two principles: the like cures like and the high dilutions. Like cures like means that something that gives you the symptoms of a disease should be able to cure you from that same disease. But beware, we're talking about symptoms. They had no idea at that time, 200 years ago, about viruses and bacteria and causes of diseases and basic anatomy. They knew nothing. So all they knew was the symptoms of the disease. So something that gives you the symptoms of the flu, for instance, or of a common cold, should be able to cure you from that common cold if it's highly diluted. And when I say highly diluted, it's really highly diluted. It's like getting a drop of that substance that you're going to use as your homeopathic medicine and dilute it in a recipient that is the size of the planet Earth. And then, of course, you've got to shake it really hard because then you get the water memory in it.
Okay, so it's not only dilution, I forgot there's a part of magic to it as well,
Yes.
the memory of, okay.
Because it's the water is supposed to remember the initial substance that was diluted until there's nothing left. So a regular homeopathic medicine is water only, or sugar, if you're taking that sugar pills. But there's nothing in it.
So you go through medical school and you learn about pharmacology. And
You should, yes.
okay. You don't learn that like cures like, though.
No.
Because let's say that poison ivy causes I don't know what you call poison ivy, but some plants cause a rash.
Yeah, poison ivy does.
Okay, so then
Causes a
if
rash.
you can get a rash from, so I don't know if measles causes a rash, or you can get a rash from a virus, right? So
you
then the
do,
theory is that if I get a rash from a virus, I should take some kind
Poison
of dilution
ivy,
agent.
highly diluted until there's nothing left from the original poison ivy, so it's
it
not
remembers.
dangerous.
Okay.
It's important to mention that it's just water. There's no poison ivy in there, so it's not dangerous, but
it wouldn't work anyway.
It also doesn't work, so it doesn't make any sense.
And then after you go through your medical school, homeopathic, was it? Whatever it is, homeopathic medicine becomes a specialty, like surgeon is a specialty, or like gynecology is a specialty,
Yes.
or...
Yes, just like that. So you
spend another year or so studying?
I think it's another 2 years that you spend studying homeopathy, and there's acupuncture too.
Wow, I had no idea that it was actually... And it's the interesting thing about this, what the other doctors that are, I'll call... Well, so they are real doctors. So what
They
do the
are.
real doctors that continue to be real doctors think of the... Is it equivalent? Everybody
is a doctor, so I think there's a market share for that. I think this is important to mention. And there's also a corporate thing. So the real doctors who are not homeopaths, they won't speak ill of their colleagues.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very difficult to get a doctor in Brazil to speak against homeopathy or acupuncture, because
It's a professional courtesy kind of?
It's a professional courtesy, yes. And
Thou
so
shalt not criticize.
they don't feel comfortable talking about that. There are very few doctors who will give interviews and say that homeopathy doesn't work or homeopathy is bogus. There are some who will, but in general they don't feel comfortable doing that because they have lots of colleagues who work with homeopathy. So it's a professional courtesy, and it really harms the system.
I should think so. But
Yes.
let me ask you, speaking of harming the system, let's say I'm a tourist and I come to Brazil, the beaches, right?
Yep.
And I step on a jellyfish. I don't know if this happens. Whatever, I hurt myself and I have to go to the emergency room. Do I have to be concerned that the person looking down at me is a homeopath?
No.
Okay, so
No,
there
but
is a
but
Western style of medicine there. So if I go to
Definitely.
the ER,
No, definitely. You'll be treated with real medicine. But
Okay,
they might offer you homeopathy as well. In Brazil, it's called integrative medicine.
Right, okay.
So they will always offer you regular treatment, but they may offer you homeopathy as a plus.
Okay.
Do you want this as well? We have this. But it's always going to be seen as integrative medicine and not alternative medicine.
so if I'm unable to give consent because I was in a car accident, I will get Western treatment.
They will treat you with regular Western medicine. But if you see, for
Thank
instance, no worries about that. You can come to Brazil. Usually, the homeopathy is popular in Brazil, but not as popular as having people really turn medicine down and choose homeopathy instead of real medicine. There are people who will do it, and of course there are people who die for doing that. We have several cases of famous actors who chose to treat their cancer with homeopathy, and then when they decided to turn back to Western medicine, it was already too late. So we have lots of anecdotes like that, but usually people prefer Western medicine. What I think happens in Brazil is that there is a huge market share for homeopathy, and of course the doctors who practice homeopathy, they make a living out of it. So they don't want it to be banned.
Well, they could go back to real medicine because they are real doctors.
They could, but then they will have to study and go over residence again, and maybe choose another specialization.
Oh, I see.
And I think most of them really believe it. They really believe that they are curing people. I don't think they are charlatans, or they think that, oh, I don't care, I just want to sell my medications. I don't think it's like that. I think they really believe that it works.
And so when you say it's a huge market share, can you give me an idea? Are like a third of the people that graduate medical school, they go to that? Or?
I have no idea. Okay. Talking about figures in Brazil, it's very difficult. My institute is trying to figure out how much is actually being spent on homeopathy in the public healthcare system, and we haven't come up with a figure yet, with a real number, because it's very scattered throughout the country, and there is the Ministry of Health gives the cities total autonomy on how they spend their health budget. So each city can choose if they're going to spend the health budget in alternative practices, or if they're going to spend it in real medicine, and we don't know the numbers. So we have to go city by city to check how they spend in their health budget.
All right, we'll circle back to that because I have several questions about that part of it.
I'm afraid I won't be able to answer half of those.
Well, some of them are
But I'm trying to.
I mean, we got far ahead of where I wanted to be, but let me back up just a little bit. All right. And so I want to read one more thing here. So you're a scientist, a research fellow, author, and a public speaker.
Yep.
Right. So I understand that author follows from your university position because you have to publish and you have to write. But public speaking doesn't necessarily follow. A lot of people don't get out of the academy and go out and start speaking. So I guess you may have answered this, but what prompted your foray into public speaking? Why did you say, I'm going to start this question of science, I have to get out there and start?
That's a funny story, actually.
Okay.
I started to work with science communication right after my daughter was born, because I decided to spend some time at home with her and be just a mom for at least a year.
So this was after your microbiology degree?
After my postdoc.
Oh, okay.
After my first postdoc, I decided to take a break from the laboratory, and I said, I want to have my baby, and I want to be at home with her for at least a year, and then I'll go back. And I knew it was a hard decision, because I knew that I couldn't. I was taking a big risk, because 1 year apart from the lab is a lot of time when you're pursuing an academic career. But I really wanted to try this and to be a mother and to be with my child for some time, for more than my license, my maternity leave. So I stayed at home. And when I stayed at home, and when she turned 1.5, I decided to enroll her in a daycare. And I started to talk to other moms. And they had do you use WhatsApp here in the US? WhatsApp is a messenger.
Oh, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a messaging network. It's just like Messenger, but we use that a lot in Brazil. So there was a group of moms in the WhatsApp, like a face group or a messenger group. We exchanged messages, and I had never been outside of the academic bubble before. So when I started to talk with these other moms, and I realized how many questions they had that were about science, and they had no answers. And they were talking a lot about what's the best baby bottle, or should I be afraid of BPA in the bottles, or what's the best baby food? Should I buy organics for my child? Are you afraid of GMOs? And these were questions that for me, they were so obvious. And I said, well, how come? Why would anyone be afraid of GMOs? And then I realized that I was living inside a bubble at the university. And at the beginning, I was very quiet at the group because I really wanted them to like me.
All right.
But then someone posted a question about vaccines.
And that was
she was really, really terrified that she was going to vaccinate her children. And when I realized, I said, these people are afraid of vaccinating their children? What the hell is going on? And then I started to speak. Then I introduced myself and I said, I'm a scientist, I work at the university, this makes no sense, vaccines are safe. And then I started to talk and they started to make more questions. And it was great because I really got to explain science to people outside the university. And these people had real questions. They were looking for information and there was nowhere to find solid scientific information in a way that they could understand, in a way that they could read and understand it, as not in a scientific article, but in a popular science magazine, for instance.
Well, before you go too far, so 2 questions come up.
Yep.
It was, you're explaining this to them. What about I'm sure they must have had primary physicians for their children. The doctors weren't explaining it properly. And the other thing is, it's interesting that you had a positive experience putting that out, because in this country, if you go onto some of the science, not even science, but the popular Facebook groups for moms, and somebody says something rational, then they get flamed with comments about...
Let me finish the story.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to that.
So before you get, okay, so we'll get to that part. But tell me just a little bit about how come they didn't rely on their doctors to tell them that?
They did, but in a way, doctors are not very, they usually don't have much time to spend talking to the patients, and they would just say, go vaccinate, vaccines are safe.
Okay.
So it's their word against a lot of fake news that you get on social media. So, okay, some of them relied on their doctors and say, okay, doctor said it's safe to vaccinate, I will. But there's a small part of that group that they were afraid, even if their doctors were saying it was safe. And then we come to the second part.
Okay.
Then I was really happy that they were listening to me, and I said, "Oh, this is good. I'm talking to people. I'm explaining science. Then they believe me. So it's good. I'm doing a good job." And then I got carried away. So I started talking about alternative medicine and homeopathy and acupuncture, and then they excluded me from the group.
Wait, excluded means that all of a sudden
Yeah,
your
they
access
deleted
was
me.
blocked?
Yeah.
Oh, so there was
they
a web
threw me
map.
off.
Oh.
It was, yeah, I recovered, but it's just as you said, it's not as easy.
Well, at least being blocked is better than getting a bunch of hate responses and
I got
threats.
those later. When I launched the institute, then I got the hate speech. But that experience with that group of moms made me realize that someone had to do this kind of work. We had a lot of science magazines in Brazil, but they were communicating the beauty of science. So we had SciComm's magazines talking about, look at the black hole, how beautiful, look at these beautiful butterflies and the importance of the pollinators. And this is awesome, and I think it's good work that they're doing, but there was nobody talking about this kind of science communication that deals with everyday life decisions that someone has to make to vaccinate their children, to buy GMOs or to buy organics if they want to, but they have to get access to real scientific information. And then they make their choices. I wanted these people to make informed choices, and they were not able to do this because the information was not available in a way that they could understand it.
I'm glad you sort of had a positive experience, and that at least it turned out very positive.
It did in the end.
And let me ask a question about Brazil in general. So Brazil has a unified healthcare system.
Yes.
So can you define that?
I think we are the largest country in the world who managed to have a unified healthcare system. It's completely free. It's paid off with taxpayers' money.
So anybody from the city to the country to the
Anybody.
I don't mean country, I mean to the
Yes.
real. So you can
Anybody is covered by this unified healthcare system. Anybody can come and use it and will be seen. But of course, Brazil is a developing country with several economic issues. So the system works, but it doesn't work as well as it should. You have long lines to wait for consultations, medicine, surgery. Sometimes you have to wait in line for a single mammogram. You have to wait 2 months. And sometimes it's too late for a good diagnosis. And so 2 months is not something that you want a woman to wait to have a single mammogram. So we have the system. In a way, we're really proud that we're able to provide healthcare to the whole country, but on the other hand, we know that it's deficient in many, many ways.
Well, is that a shortage of professionals so it's a doctor shortage? It would work better if you had more.
There's a doctor shortage. They are really underpaid, so they prefer to go into private practice, because if they go into public practice, they know that they will be underpaid, so it's kind of an ideology. Most of doctors who choose to work for the government, they choose because they want to do something for the public, but they are not going to be as well paid as if they went in private practice.
So you just mentioned that Brazil is a developing country, but you've used that as a joke before, as in it's a developing country and the U.S. is its role model, including all of the pseudoscience and baloney. So what other things are happening there that they're importing from the United States, and they're also exporting as well? Is that correct? They're exporting some of their pseudoscience here?
Oh, I don't know. I think maybe if you have faith healers or something that come from Brazil, but I don't think so. I think we import pseudoscience, and we import politics as well, because you see, you got Trump, we got the tropical Trump.
The tropical Trump?
Yeah, Bolsonaro is the tropical Trump.
Well, and you're a very young democracy. Is that what you've also said that?
Yes, we are. We were a dictatorship until the 80s. So we are a very young democracy. It's been, over 25 years.
Was the unified healthcare part of the previous? So that's how long have you had the unified?
It came with the new constitution.
Oh, so it wasn't prior to the democracy?
No.
Oh,
it came after, right after the dictatorship ended, and we drafted the new constitution. The constitution itself has a provision that says that everybody is entitled to health care.
Okay.
And so it was a really beautiful idea, but it also came in a moment where people were trying to they were just finding out what democracy was about, and I think that sense of freedom gave a sense of, I want to be able to choose what kind of health treatment I want. So I think democracy and freedom got mixed up in a way that people thought that it was democratic for a person to choose how they were going to be treated. It was not to be imposed by the government or by a doctor.
Oh, so a totally open democracy where every choice is...
Every choice is equal.
Okay.
And science doesn't work like that.
Science doesn't work like that, no.
Yeah, so that's the problem. So people say, even up to this day, when I talk about homeopathy and acupuncture and alternative medicine in the healthcare system, people say, you shouldn't mess into other people's lives and choices. Everyone is free to get treated as they want. And I said, yes, I agree with that. Everyone should be free to make their own choices. But we are talking about a public healthcare system. That's taxpayers' money, that's public money. So public money must be invested in the most rational way. And science doesn't work that way. Science is not democratic in the way that we can choose what works and what doesn't. We have to prove it. And this is difficult to explain to people sometimes. People say, I want to be able to choose my treatment. I said, okay, go ahead, but not in the public system.
I imagine that in Brazil, like here as well, in other countries, but especially because it's developing, if you don't mind if I use that term, I guess.
No, of course not.
I guess I'll call it folk medicine, probably has a strong foothold. And modern science medicine is kind of new anyway. So when you're reaching some communities that have only had folk medicine, and they want to sustain that belief system. Is every kind of folk medicine an equal choice?
Yeah, the problem with folk medicine in Brazil, I think...
I don't know if there's a better term for it, but...
No, I think it's a good term, and I think, of course, we have it. But if you take, for instance, homeopathy is not a Brazilian thing. Acupuncture is not a Brazilian thing. All these energy healings and laying of the hands, and they are not Brazilian at all.
Those are covered too?
Yes, those are covered in the
laying on of hands and
laying of hands and spiritual healing and bee therapy. We have the bees, pollinators.
Oh,
you know,
bee therapy.
You have bee therapy. We have geotherapy, circular dancing.
Circular dancing?
I have no idea what that is, but it's there. It's listed as an alternative practice. What a family constellation. There are some bizarre things that I have never heard of, and most of them are not Brazilian.
Oh.
They are not from our communities or like folk medicine, but they have nothing to do with Brazil. They were all imported. So I don't think it's really about that. What we have in Brazil that we could call folk medicine, it's herbal medicine.
I guess that's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, herbal medicine, we have some. But herbal medicine is the least pseudoscientific of those, because sometimes it really works. It's just a matter of going through the scientific method and turning that into a regular medicine. So it's just about getting those things tested. And I think we should, because there's a lot of herbal medicine that could work and we don't know about, but it has to be tested before you start distributing it to the public. If you use herbal medicine without testing, then you don't know how it's going to interact with other medicines that the person is taking, or if pregnant women can take it, or elderly people. So you just have to test it. But I wouldn't look the other way and say, oh, it's all bogus. It's not. It's herbs, it's plants. Maybe they have
And that's where a lot of medicine did come from.
Yes, but most of regular medicine came from that, so I think it's worth investigating, but it has to be investigated.
How is the government balancing its responsibility to the citizen for safe and accurate treatment versus the right to choose? Not every legislator here in the United States is science trained, so they don't always make the best decisions when voting. We do have an FDA that's supposed to protect us from certain things. We do have an FTC, the Trade Commission is supposed to protect us in advertising.
We do have all of that in Brazil.
Okay.
So we have a regulatory agency, just like the FDA. We have consumer protection. And we have the federal councils, but as I said, in a country where the Federal Council of Medicine recognizes homeopathy as a practice, what can the regulatory agency do? She says that the regulatory agency is called Anvisa in Brazil, and it says that homeopathic drugs are safe.
Okay, so they have to be proven safe, but not effective.
Not effective. So then they are safe. What can you say? It's water.
So you have an FDA that will also regulate pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
So pharmaceuticals have to be proven safe and effective?
Yes.
But homeopathy just has to pass the safe threshold?
Yes, because it's regulated as a supplement.
Oh, all right, of course, in this country as well, yes. So.
Yeah, I think here it works in a similar way. So if it's a supplement, it just has to be safe. It doesn't have to prove effective. So they bypass all the effectiveness regulation, of course, because if a homeopathic drug would undergo all the clinical trials, it would never be approved.
So what about the Federal Trade Commission part, the truth in advertising? How does that play into it? Because they can't list anything on the bottle. They do say this treats headaches or take this for a cold or something, so that's advertised. Okay.
Yeah, they do. What happens is that in Brazil, most homeopathic drugs are prescribed and they they are manipulated in...
It's a prescription?
It's a prescription, yes.
Okay.
So you don't get a lot of over-the-counter homeopathic medications as you do here in the US. We do have some pharmacies that will sell over the counter, but usually it's a prescribed and manipulated medicine. So you have to go to a specialized pharmacy and they will, with a prescription from a doctor, and they will develop that medication just for you. It's specialized. And most homeopaths in Brazil, they say that the kind of homeopathy that is sold over the counter doesn't work, because homeopathy is to be very personal. So it has to be tailor-made for that patient. And what works for you is not going to work for me, for instance, because we're very different people. And homeopathy is supposed to be tailor-made for that specific patient. So these over-the-counter medications for this kind of homeopathy, it doesn't work. For them, it's bogus.
So that's interesting because they're getting into more of a marketing kind of thing.
Yep.
Wow. So they're saying that this part of it's bogus, but not my part of it.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
There's a split in the homeopathic practice. And about the Trade Commission, they can't say a word if the Federal Council of Medicine recognizes that.
Okay, so there's a hierarchy there.
Yes, because if they, we're going to protect the people and we're going to say that, like you did here in the US, the Federal Trade Commission authorized that homeopathic drugs should carry a warning, right? And so
some kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, that basically says this doesn't work. We couldn't do that in Brazil because the Federal Council of Medicine says that it works.
Oh, yeah.
So it's complicated. It is.
All right, let's get off homeopathy for a second, and because there was some fascinating information from Brazil. Specifically, your university had a professor that discovered a cure for every type of cancer.
Oh, yes.
And that's an amazing thing coming out of a university system. And I mean, you can't argue with results like that. And I assume that your university is a public university, is taxpayer funded?
Yes.
So, and they manufactured the product. So what's a cure for all cancer? I mean, that's incredible, yet people are still dying from it. So what happened? How come the word hasn't reached the U.S. about this amazing fellow?
Oh, it has. You're selling it here in the U.S. as a supplement.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right, so why don't you fill us in on what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, it was a shame, really, and it happened in my university. University of São Paulo is
for decades, right?
For decades, yes.
Okay.
And the University of São Paulo is the largest university in Latin America. So usually we are really proud of the work that we do at the university. But there was this chemistry professor in one of the campuses of the university. It was a small town called São Carlos. And in that town, he decided that he had found out the cure for all cancers. And he started to manufacture in his laboratory a pill, a magic cancer pill.
Wait, before you go on too far, I'm sorry to interject, but when you say he decided, that makes it seem like he decided. But can you may be getting to this. If you are, just say you're getting to it. But when you say decided, he did a bunch of tests on different...
No, not really. He just took it out of the hat.
Okay, go on then. So he did decide.
Yes.
All right.
He invented a cancer pill. And he decided that it worked.
So okay.
And he started to distribute it to the local population and say, if you want to cure your cancer, you take this pill and you quit chemotherapy.
Oh, he went that far?
Yes, he did. He did. He denied it, but we have proof that he did. There are lots of people who went to get the pills at the university and said, no, he told me to stop chemotherapy because the magical pill needed my immune system to be intact, to be fully operating, and chemo would harm my immune system. So he said I should stop chemotherapy and take his pill instead.
There has to be some kind of a rules violation there.
There is.
On the federal level. So
it's a crime.
It is a crime. Okay.
It is a crime.
But it was manufactured at the university for decades, so isn't that kind of tacit approval? So you can answer those two questions. It's a crime, but it was tacitly approved.
The university pretended not to know about it, which is ridiculous because everybody in the town knew about it. It's a small town. And everybody knew. People would go to the university to get the pills from him. And nobody talked. Nobody talked. So we're talking about a system that is so corporative. I don't know how to say if it makes the same sense in English, but it's a corporate thing.
Oh, okay.
So people will do anything to protect whoever is in the corporation, and he was part of the university. So he was a professor. I mean, we had
a chemistry professor.
A chemist. A
Okay.
chemist, and a full professor at the university. He was about to retire when the university decided to take action. Actually, the university only took action after his retirement. So as soon as he retired, then the dean of the university decided to close his laboratory and stop the pills production. But what happened was that you had a whole city and people coming from all the parts of the country that wanted the pill. They were taking the pill for months, and suddenly the production stopped. So people got angry, and they started to manifest against the university and go out in the streets.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, it was huge. You had lots of people protesting against the university for stopping the pills production. So it was really an amazing phenomenon. I never thought I'd see something like that, and I blame the university because they should have taken action.
So you did step out and criticize your own system then, the corporation.
I did, but I was one of the few ones who did it. And he died this year, the professor. But before he died, he was involved in some kind of administrative sanction from the university, but he was still a retired professor getting full pay at the time that he died. And he wasn't prosecuted inside the university or criminally prosecuted.
It was a crime, though, right? Because we haven't covered that part about handing pills, selling your manufactured pills out of your university office and telling people it's a cure for cancer is a crime.
It is.
So was that investigated at the criminal level?
No.
Well, what about weren't there dead bodies piling up? Or are you telling me that people that stopped chemo, the pill didn't work? Did they do any studies, any testing, anything?
No, they didn't. But the dead don't talk. So these people, they died of cancer.
So how do you explain that?
The medical records are going to show that they died from the cancer. They didn't know, the doctors didn't know if they were taking pills or not.
I see.
So we have no ways to assess how many people died from abandoning their treatments to go on the pill. We have no idea, because people won't speak about it, and families won't speak.
Oh, that's interesting, though.
Yes. Because some families came out and spoke, but usually people would think that, it wasn't the pill that killed my brother or my father or my mother, it was the cancer.
Well, that's true, but the pill was supposed to cure the cancer.
And then you try to reason with those people and you say, okay, but your father, your brother, they stopped treatment to go on the pill. Don't you think that this was really what killed them? And then people will say, oh, but maybe they started the pill when it was too late.
Oh, that's always a good one.
If they had started sooner, it would have worked. So there's always some kind of excuse.
Well, let's get back to the chemistry part of it then. Without going into specific detail about what was in the pill, was there anything that was plausible at all?
No.
Oh.
No,
okay.
not really. It was completely implausible, and
I wouldn't even know what that means, but I'll take your word for it as a biomedical.
It will take me long to explain
you don't have to,
it.
But
it wasn't like it. There was no real active compound there that has any kind of anti-tumoral effect.
And there was no, he never did a controlled study with people that took the pill, people that didn't take the pill, people that did chemo and took the pill?
We did it afterwards. So,
so there have been studies
yes,
now.
Not a long study, but the thing turned into such a big commotion in Brazil that the Institute for Cancer of the state of São Paulo decided to intervene and said, okay, if he didn't test it, because the professor responsible never tested it. He never tested it in cell cultures or in animals or in people, anything. He just believed that it worked and started to distribute to the population. So when it turned in such a big commotion, then the Institute for Cancer Studies of the state of São Paulo said, okay, we are going to test it. And they made an agreement with the professor, and he would provide the pills, and they would test it at the institute. And they did. And the results were, of course, that it didn't work. But then, when the results came out, the professor sued the Cancer Institute and said that they were faking the results.
So wait, so the fraudster sued the tester for fraud?
Yes, exactly. And you were talking about politicians here in the US, that they are not very science literate. You have no idea what the situation is like in Brazil. We had inside the State Assembly in São Paulo, the State Congress, we had a lot of congressmen who also decided to sue the Cancer Institute. So
so the government sued the institute?
Yeah, it's not really a regular. It's a different kind of action that they move, and I'm having a lot of trouble trying to think of the English equivalent. But it's when congressmen call you to present yourself at Congress and explain.
Oh, a subpoena.
Yeah, subpoena. Okay. Yes.
So they subpoenaed the Cancer Institute that did the research to go explain the research to them?
Yes.
And so they show up and say, well, here's the research. What do you want to know?
Yeah, but they didn't buy it. They said that they were faking the results. And
they were faking null results.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And it climbed up to the Supreme Court. So the thing, it was a never-ending story, really. And when it got to the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional, and we should, and the university should stop producing it. The university had already stopped.
Okay, so it's done then.
So now it's done. Now it's done. We are no longer producing it in Brazil.
But you still have the people rioting or going into the streets. So now that it is officially over, I can't imagine a lot of people were too happy about that.
Well, the thing is, it is officially over, and the professor died, so people are quieter now. But a group that worked with this professor started to manufacture it as a supplement here in the US.
Oh, okay.
So you can get it here. It's called phosphoetanolamine, and it's sold as a supplement here in the US. It's not written that it cures cancer. It says it's a supplement, but you have various indications that it is for cancer. So they market it with a bald woman with a scarf.
Oh, okay.
And they say it's a supplement.
It's a graph.
So
there are other issues that you tackle besides pseudoscientific medicine. You mentioned GMOs, genetically modified, but more like genetically edited. Because tell me about the golden mosaic viral threat to the brown beans and then your mosaic resistant beans, because that's actually a big success story for Brazil, right?
It is. We're really proud of it.
But it's another thing that you got some, not criticism, but probably not some popular comments from. So tell me about what's going on there, first of all.
Yeah.
So the brown beans very important in Brazil?
Yes, they are part of our everyday diet. Rice and beans are the most popular Brazilian dish. It's an everyday dish. You eat it every day, and we usually use brown beans, not black beans. So it's a very Brazilian thing. It's not an import-export product. We produce it and consume it in Brazil. And there is a virus that it's transmitted by a fly. It's called a white fly, and it was devastating our brown beans cultivation in Brazil, and producers could lose up to 100% of their produce of the crop. Yep. Sorry.
That's all right.
So it was a big thing in Brazil, and we have a national company called Embrapa, who research agriculture biotechnical solutions. So it's a national company. We're really proud of it. It's an international, it's an independent research institute, but it's government funded. And they started to develop about, I think it's been more than 12 years ago, about 15 years ago, they started to work on a genetically modified bean that would be naturally resistant to the virus that is transmitted by the whitefly. And they did. They came to a product that's completely resistant to the virus, so you don't have to use insecticides anymore. It reduces the use of pesticide to almost zero. And farmers were using 10 to 15 applications of insecticides per crop.
Per crop?
In Brazil.
Wow.
So it's a lot. It's a lot of pesticide. It raises the cost of production, and of course, the less pesticide you use, the better for health as well. So it was a huge advancement in Brazil. And
well,
because
it's a win-win then, right?
It is.
So everybody's happy.
They should be.
Uh-oh.
But people are so afraid of genetically modified organisms that even when you explain, okay, we're going to reduce the use of pesticide, this is a good thing. It's a good thing for the farmer and for the consumer as well, because the prices will go down. And even so, people are so afraid of GMOs that there was a large campaign against it. And it took us 8 years to get the GMO beans into the market.
Oh, after it had already been tested?
After it had been tested and approved by the Biotech Commission
so
in
now
Brazil.
So now that it's in the market, is it like, do you have two beans next to each other? This is the genetically engineered bean and this is the all-natural bean? Are they still both on the shelf?
And they are not on the shelves yet, because they have just been released. So they should be on the shelf next year, I believe.
Are they going to keep up with the pesticide ones?
They are.
Okay, so a farmer is free to choose which bean he grows.
Yes.
But let's talk a little bit about genetically editing. I'm going to say that word because modifying sometimes means a little bit different, I think. So it's actually editing, and I'll attempt this, but you please explain it to me. So basically, in the bean, what is it, small interference RNA, they trick the bean, it's already got the ability to become resistant, and so they trick it into thinking it's been vaccinated or something by turning on the small interference RNA. So you're not importing a gene from anything else, you're going in.
You're not using any kind of foreign DNA.
You're turning on a switch, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's like a vaccine. It's perfect the way you put it. You just vaccinate the bean and you use its natural defenses to become resistant.
But you didn't vaccinate it. Let's make that clear. You didn't vaccinate it. So we don't want to get people scared about vaccinating beans. But the reason I bring it up like that is because I know sometimes in genetically modified organisms, people are concerned that you're bringing in a gene from a totally different species and you don't know how that's going to react with this species. Perhaps there'll be some kind of Franken bean that'll take over the world. But in genetic editing, you're turning on a switch.
Yes.
So it's already there. So if it perhaps, I don't know if it actually works like this, but I don't know if the beans were infected, but they managed to get through, would their offspring beans be immune?
Not really.
Okay, so but by turning the switch on, they are.
Yes.
And okay, so it's important to know that you haven't done anything that's not there already. You just
No,
turn the switch on.
there's no foreign DNA.
So
in there. There's no DNA from other species, although that's quite safe as well. And we know that we exchange DNA with several other species. We have been doing that throughout evolution.
Okay, I just wanted to make it clear though that in this case it's an editing thing.
It's editing, yes.
Okay, so now from that point, explain to me what's the controversy then. If you can explain to people, where is the controversy there? Is it just you're messing with nature, or?
I think the controversy is that people don't understand the biotechnology techniques. And I think it's our fault as scientists. We really should make an effort to explain exactly that to people. There are several ways of genetically modifying an organism, and there are different ways, and we have been doing it for 10,000 years. We have been modifying our food ever since we stopped being collectors. So when we started practicing agriculture, we started to modify food. And these modifications are genetic. The only thing that changed was the techniques that we used. So we developed more advanced techniques throughout time, but it's still genetic modification. When we cross species that would never meet in nature, or they wouldn't be able, if it was cross-pollination and hybrids, that would never happen in nature, and we've been doing that for 10,000 years, and it's okay. People accept that. So why don't people accept that instead of working with hybrids, we are now working directly into the gene that we want to modify, either by using foreign DNA from other species or by editing the DNA of that particular organism. So it's just about developing newer and more precise techniques. But it's all about the technique. So the idea is that we have been genetically modifying everything that we eat for 10,000 years. There should be nothing to be afraid of. If we're going to think like that, all our food is Franken food, because it has been modified. It's nothing that would grow on its own, on nature. It's domestic plants.
So you have a public, if I put it this way, it'll probably get not great reviews, but so you have a public perception problem.
I think so, yeah.
So the perception, first of all, it got off to a bad start because I won't call it a group, but I'll say there's some people that are just against this whatsoever. So they had a head start criticizing it. And then you're coming after saying, no, no, no. So it looks like you're making excuses.
It does, yes.
So if the scientists finally come out and start not promoting it, but I guess the word is defending it or explaining the science, it's a little bit after the fact, and there's a huge head start in front of you. And
exactly.
so then you probably get criticized for, I don't know if you would be called just outright lying or fraudulent, but probably that you've been paid by, in this country it works, you've been paid off by the companies and such. Yep. I mean, is that some kind of...
In Brazil, it's the same.
But in Brazil, wasn't it the government that developed? Oh no, you said it was a private company. Okay.
No, the beans were developed by the government. It's a government-funded company.
Okay, so it's not a private company you're shilling for.
It's not. It's not. So that argument, people are not using it.
Okay.
That it's how the multinational is going to take over our agriculture. No, Embrapa is a very consolidated company. It's a national company in Brazil, but still. People were afraid, there were lots of people involved. The people in manufacturing were afraid that consumers aren't going to buy it. So
so they didn't want to invest the money to do it.
The packaging system wouldn't want to invest because they said, oh, there's
packaging.
we're not going to market that, we're not going to package those beans because then people, the final consumer is not going to buy it once it's on the shelf, because when it's on the shelf, it's going to have that GMO thing and people will see it and they are not going to buy it. So let's see when it gets to the shelf. But so far, farmers have bought the seeds. Farmers are investing in that technology. They say, no, I want that.
So they're taking a risk. Are they subsidized by the government to invest in the bean?
No.
So it's all
they are taking the risk. But if you figure out how much they were spending on pesticides before, I think they are taking the risk because it's probably worth it. They had to spend a lot on insecticides.
I was going to say, so are people actually coming out and saying, oh, let's not genetically edit, let's just keep dosing with pesticides, that's a better thing?
Yeah, people think that there is a third alternative. Brazil is very big into agroecology, and there are lots of people who really believe that we can have an all-organic production in agriculture in Brazil and don't use pesticides at all.
Okay, so what would happen to the bean without the editing and without pesticides, and if it got this virus? I mean, what's the crop yield? You said it can be 100%.
It can be 100% loss. But people don't believe it. They said, no, you can do crop rotation, you can use natural pesticides, you can use organic pesticides.
Well, there's still pesticides, but okay.
There's still pesticides, yes, but people don't know that. They think organics are always better, and the organic pesticides, they should be better.
They can actually be pretty harsh.
They can, but I think we are not succeeding as scientists in communicating that to the people. People still believe that if it's organic, it either doesn't use pesticides at all, which is a lie, or that organic pesticides are safer than regular pesticides, which is also a lie. But people believe that. In Brazil, they believe it very firmly. And they really believe that organic agriculture can solve the problem in Brazil. We don't need GMOs, we don't need pesticides. It's a very naive situation that we have, the way people regard agriculture in Brazil. And to think that it's a country that really relies on agriculture as its first economy source. So I think we are failing as scientists.
Well,
to communicate that.
I should also say about pesticides in general, I didn't mean to say good, bad, indifferent, but actually the judicious use of pesticides is nothing to be too alarmed about either.
Yeah.
Because it's a very small amount that's used, but if you're having to do it 12 to 15 times, and it's more cost efficient to edit, why not do it? Wow, we've covered a lot of information, I must say. So let me sum up with one final thing. So science versus folklore and media hype, and we kind of touched on this. Do you think you're starting to win the battle? Is it a losing battle in general because there's more... Okay, I like that facial expression. So, and what kind of response? So that's one question. And what is the response that you've gotten with your support for genetically engineered foods? I guess. So you're fighting a losing battle. And what kind of hate mail do you get from the?
Hate mail is funny. But let me try to.
You're public. You must be easily locatable through your university position, right? You have to be listed. Anybody can look up your name in the university, and your email has to come up because you're public. You're an instructor or a fellow.
Yes, it's easy to find me, and people do find me. So there was some very funny episodes about hate speech. When I started writing about the cancer pill, I used to get messages. I don't know how people got my cell phone number.
Oh, they get your cell phone number.
I don't know how. It's not listed, and it shouldn't be listed.
Right,
my email is listed, but not my cell phone number. But people got hold of that, and several people started sending me messages with pictures of children dying from cancer and saying that it was my fault because I was trying to stop the production of the magic miracle pill.
Wow.
So that was very, very heavy. I remember getting those messages every day in my cell phone, several pictures of children suffering from several kinds of cancer and people saying, you see, this is all your fault.
Wow.
So that was, and then it stopped.
Good.
But then when I started writing a lot about GMOs and the agricultural system in Brazil, then I got the other kind of hate mail that was, who do you work for? We have to find out who's behind this institute. This institute has a hidden agenda. And
science communication.
Yeah. But it's funny, we're going to celebrate our anniversary now in November, so we're going to have a big event. And the building that we chose to have an event, they have spaces for amphitheaters that you can rent for space, just like here. So there's conference rooms, and we rented a conference room in the same building where there is a pharmaceutical company. We knew nothing about that pharmaceutical company. It's a big pharmaceutical in Brazil. And then people started to tag me on Facebook and say, oh, you see, is it a coincidence? Her institute is going to hold a conference in the exact same building of this pharmaceutical company. And I said, okay, it is a coincidence.
It is a coincidence.
And it's a good building. They have a lot of good conference rooms over there.
Well, it's like last year, SciCon was at a different location, and right next they were having some kind of huge gymnastics meet, or something was going on.
Yeah.
So?
But you see how far people go to try to make that connection.
Oh, yeah.
So people are trying to...
But that answer, yes, it is a coincidence.
Yes.
People then don't go, oh, okay. They don't buy that either, right?
No, they don't. They want to find out who's behind me. There must be someone paying for me or
in your organization.
And my organization. So now this is the kind of hate speech that I get. And it changes. It changes throughout time. Of course, there are lots of homeopathy societies in Brazil now that also sometimes they write to national newspapers saying that there is an institute that wants to ban homeopathy from Brazil, and this is absurd because homeopathy is a recognized medical practice. And, well, they have a point there, it is. But I'm trying to fight that. So I do get a lot of that. Something you get used to.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, really. You get a lot of that every day. So you learn how to turn it off. And you say, okay, well, people are going to talk anyway. Let me do my job.
All right.
But as for the other question, I think we're getting a good response.
Good.
We have a lot of hate speech. But if you go on our Facebook page or to our Twitter handle, you see that there are several other people that defend us.
So you keep it
From the-
open for people to go back?
Yes.
You're not editing? Okay, good.
No, we don't. We only edit when people really
If
get...
it's really out, okay.
Yeah, when
But you let the
people
conversation...
get too harsh.
Okay.
But usually we just let them. And there are several other people that speak for us. And they defend us. So I think we're succeeding in building a community in Brazil. And that's exactly what we wanted. We said we have to build a community of people who support science and who support rational thinking. And then when that community is built, then we can take harsher actions. Then maybe we can press the government. But we need a community. We can't do it by ourselves. And that's what we're trying to build. I think so far we're doing pretty well. We've had, our magazine has had over 5 million readers in the first year.
That is good then. All right, Natalia Pasternak, Dr. Natalia Pasternak.
Oh, come on.
Thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasant conversation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
it
you're
was
welcome.
Great.
Oh, I think it was great to get this out here. And so if you're interested in emailing me, you can email me at 502conversations@gmail.com. Hopefully it won't be hate mail, so I'm not used to it.
I hope so.
So thank you once again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.